George,
Okay.
and welcome to another day of Female Warrior Week here on Sensei Emmetts YouTube channel. And today we're joined by Georgina Bevan, a judoka from Wales. Get that out there. You're very welcome back, Georgina. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you. Thanks for asking again. And hopefully I might be able to do a little bit with some of the girls from the club and help with this week.
Excellent.
It's really important week, and it's really nice to be involved in it at this kind of status rather than just in a sports capacity, but actually as a mum and a coach this time.
Excellent. Now, and it's great too that some of the young girls in your club are actually trying to help out. Now it's kind of partly what I wanted to do was actually get young students involved and kind of show them sort of successful martial artists, if you will, and kind of show them the different avenues that you can go using martial arts, and also the personal development involved in it, which I know is something that you wanted to talk about today. Now was physical and mental.
For me, I think, you know, I've talked about it already. The Welsh education system is going through a big change with sport, high profile, having more of a higher profile, and physical and mental well-being being really crucial. I think there are so many good things about judo in that way that helps you as a young person. This isn't about becoming an Olympian, becoming, you know, that kind of high level status, because actually that brings its aches and pains as well, as we know. So, you know, I think it's about, you know, that sort of grassroots level, kind of have that really good involvement with the whole roundedness of what judo is. Personally, for me, I left it at 31 as an athlete, and then came back when my children got involved. You know, I wanted them to do it again, not to follow in my footsteps particularly, but to have that experience. Both Sister and I did it. We are both confident, not overly body conscious, I think, is another key trait in girls that have done judo. You know, they're used to mucking in, getting sweaty, getting in and out of changing rooms quickly, all of that as you get older. And I think they're really key things that affect a young girl's well-being. Also, it's really adaptable to different personalities. You know, I wanted my son to do it because he was quite quiet, quite introvert. He's really reserved, and actually I wanted him to do it to have that experience and build his confidence a little bit. He wasn't a kid that wanted to go on the stage at school and all of those sorts of things. And as soon as we got him on the mat, it took a couple of weeks of me standing there in my work clothes next to him, getting him on the mat. As soon as we got him on the mat, he began to love it, and he loved the physicality of it. He really likes the tradition of it. He loves the Japanese-ness of it. You know, he likes how disciplined it is. He likes the order about it. He likes that actual opportunity to be learning and doing it with, you know, other people, fighting in a controlled environment. So my daughter then started it earlier because obviously he was there. And again, she just quite enjoyed meeting all the girls around at the start of the lesson, you know, before they get to have a little bit of free time on the mat before we start the session. And she really enjoyed that. She liked the cartwheeling and the forward rolling, the gymnastic-y element of it, which my son particularly has worked at because it wasn't something that came natural to him. But actually, Callie, very competitive, very determined. She's not remotely interested in the Japanese at all. You know, so my son is very similar to my husband in his personality and approaches to things, and my daughter's very similar to me. So, but two very different personalities. It has still been a fabulous sport for them to both do.
Yeah.
And again, if they'd wanted to stop, I would have said, no, that's fine, just stop. And another reason for me personally, I wanted my daughter to do it in case of any situation when you're out and about and you get approached or challenged. That did happen when I was a player. There were members of the team that were attacked, and they handled the situation very well. You know, and I think that's whether it is to run or whether it is to fight, I think it just gives you that confidence in that situation. It's not about turning around and getting back into it. It's about knowing what to do when that situation presents itself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that judo teaches you, is that builds that awareness and understanding of a situation and how to handle it. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted my daughter to do it, who's a fearless horse rider anyway. So she's never had that kind of fear, things like that. But I wanted her to have that confidence as she grew up. But yeah, two very different characters that have really benefited from it in really different ways. And I think they've both missed it for different reasons with the COVID crisis. My son in particular has missed his friends that he's made at Bilf. You know, they're people he has a lot in common with, judo. He particularly loves the competition element. Again, I didn't know if we'd ever get into a competition with how he'd been young when he was younger. But yeah, he particularly misses that and that opportunity to see the people he competes with on the circuit. You know, he's starting to develop friendship groups around the circuit. There's certain parents you see, aren't there, at every competition or event that you go to. So he's particularly missed that. Callie, not so much. I mean, she doesn't mind the competition. She just wants to go and win. She's not interested in anything else about it. So she's only, and her friend, they only had like 2 goes at competitions, and then we all went into lockdown because of their age. So from that perspective, I think they've both missed it for very different reasons. And we tried to keep the sessions going in the lounge, but you know, you can imagine at times you might even sense it through the video. There's some gritted teeth on me where I'm still trying to G them along, because it's very hard for them and for myself to keep them motivated and then be so detached from it, you know. And it was even hard when we went back for that little time and it all being static. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I know myself, like when I first started here at judo, it was always sort of looked at as a competition sport and very competitive and athletic. But do you think there is that philosophical side to it for anyone that doesn't want to kind of go the competition route, where they can still practice and there's something there for them outside of competition?
If you'd asked me that 20 years ago, I'd have been probably nah. You know, I'm from a very competitive club as a kid. We were one of the best in the world as a club, produced God knows how many world medalists, Olympians. I was bred on competition, you know, used to do 30, 40 a year. However, if you do want to be a competitor, I think you do need that competition experience. My son talks about the butterflies in his belly. Yeah. He talks about that as well, and she says she gets them in other things now, so she knows how to deal with it. So from that perspective, but I would say as a coach, some of the things I've seen since becoming a coach are really humbling around what the sport does. We have had children of various learning needs that have come to judo, and you know, their parents have wanted them to have a go. One boy in particular jumps to mind. He's quite autistic, and he absolutely loves it. You know, he's been there during when we went back briefly. His sister's now started. He's struggled a little bit with the techniques themselves because of his hand-eye coordination, and things aren't as good as the other children. But you know what? None of the kids have taken the mickey. They're all really inclusive. When they fight him, they look after him. You know, they just seem to look after each other, and it enables that in that sport. And I can't imagine he's going to be somebody that will want to do a lot of competitions. Yeah. But he might surprise me. He decided he wanted to move up to the next session, which was a nice surprise, because we thought we were going to come to a bit of a limbo, you know, where you suddenly go from the under 8s to the under 16. Yeah. It's a big jump, isn't it? And the difference of technique and things like that. But no, he's handled it really, really well. And I think that's absolutely fabulous. We've also got another girl at the club who has, I think it's cerebral palsy. And she competed in, like, I think it was a special competition, it was called, down in Cardiff. She got a gold, I think, and she's also a swimmer as well. And I think, you know, it's amazing the tenacity those children have when they're against an able-bodied child in a fighting, fighting environment. And I just think it's absolutely fabulous. Another element to it is it really helps a child develop confidence in both their demeanor, their self-awareness. They're very disciplined. I think there were many children I did judo with, both at, you know, grassroots level right up to senior international level. Very few of them ended up in serious trouble. You know, there was hundreds and hundreds of children. At one point at my old judo club, we had about 400 kids to adults. So thousands must have gone through under Don Werner. I can count on one or two, maybe one or two I know of that ended up in real trouble. You know, everybody else sort of seemed to find their way in the world, whatever it was, without getting into too much bother. Gives you that kind of discipline, being part of a successful culture, a well-respected culture. There's always you know, judo demands a lot of respect. I think that's, you know, that's one of the key things of it. You know, the way we start a session, finish a session, you bow between fights, it's all very respectful. I mean, it's not really the gentle way that it defines by definition, but it is all very respectful. And I think that's really, really nice. I think another element of it that I've certainly seen over the years, and I see it now, you know, having nearly 45, started judo 40 years ago, is the friendship groups you make. I think martial arts generally gives you that opportunity to see each other in really challenging situations. Really, you know, for me, it was when I used to sweat off and lose weight and be like collapsing, and they'd be dragging out my sweat gear and helping me or running. But also that opportunity to be part of their success or part of their achievement, part of their journey. And you see that more as a coach than I ever did as a player. But it is hard then to not fully immerse yourself in it as a mum that works full time and has got young children, you know. So I think there's so much to offer with it, and I would love to see it as a sport that's done in schools as part of the curriculum.
Definitely.
It has so much to offer around the whole bodiness of it. You know, there's the mental strength, the mental confidence, the adaptability you have to have. You know, there's no one there to bail you out. It's not like being in a team. You know, if you're in a competition, or even just in a randori or training at the club, you've got to think on your feet, you know, or it's a painful experience. You keep getting thrown. So you have to be really adaptable, and you have to really think on your feet really quickly. And I think those problem-solving skills on the hoof are invaluable. And I think there would be probably quite a connection between what judo players have gone on to as careers. It's because they've developed that skill set by being in that environment regularly. I think that's really important.
I think judo as well it kind of forces you to work on foundations a lot, because if you take it, when you first start, a lot of your classes are break falling, how to fall. You get so tired of doing it, and so I never want to do this again. And then someone throws you, and you're going, I want to go back to doing that. But
I think as well, it's real life metacognition, which is what we talk about in education. You know, those building blocks of learning. You know, from a maths teacher perspective, I wouldn't teach you how to find the area of a shape if you couldn't multiply. You know, you have to know how to multiply before you can find the area of the shape. And I think that's really, really important in judo. And I think the steps are really defined. It's some ways it's easier than other sports. Like you say, if you can't roll, you can't be thrown, because you're going to break something really quickly. So I think that's really, and you could see the children wincing when they came back, because they were landing, you know, because they were so out of, you know, the mats felt hard, everything felt hard because they'd been off of them for so long. I used to remember if I'd go on holiday, come back, the kit would just shred my skin, because you know, I hadn't got that sort of Brillo pad skin from being in a judo kit every day. So I think you know, like you say, there's a lot to be said about that, and I think those foundations are really clear. But it's quite hard to not push on really quickly as well. You know, and I when I did my coaching training through the BJ, it was like you only give them 3 instructions maximum, and it's really hard to only give them 3 when you can see 5 or 6 things they need to quickly tweak. it's cognitive overload, you know, their brain won't take it in, will it? But you sort of thinking, don't forget this, don't forget that. So yeah, I think from that perspective, it's a real clear path. And I think that's then what enables success for all. I think the nicest thing about it is you can measure your own success against your own achievements. It's not about how you do in a competition next to somebody else, unless they happen to be in the weight. It's more like to see that boy that I was talking about, how he has finally got to the point that he can now do a Meimawari Ukemi and he can do break falls, and he does remember what Taitoshi is. And it's taken years, but he has got there, and he has maintained it, and he has come back every week to do that. And I think that's really, really key and really important. I mean, I think as well, the building blocks aren't just the judo. The building blocks are the mental element of being able to be independent. You know, I remember vividly going to my club years after, you know, as I was coming to the end of my career, and him having lots and lots of little ones sat in front of him. And he said, right, eyes on me, eyes on me. And so one of the parents said to one of the kids, whatever his name was, make sure now you look at Don. So this boy turned to listen to his mother telling him to make sure he looked at Don. She didn't need to say a word. She didn't need to say Don had him. He had him. So straight away then that kid got absolutely told off. What are you turning around for? Why are you and it was that it gives the parents opportunity to let go, and it gives that child that opportunity to take responsibility, and their own independence grows. And I think the more accomplished they become, the more confident they come, the more they grow in themselves. And I think that's a really nice element to it. And they can see their own personal development, like the belts is you know, getting your black belt for some people is the only thing they want to do. You know, like old thing they want to do, which is absolutely amazing. And that's what they are working towards. You know, I've never been somebody that has much experience of kata, but I know that's a really big element of judo, that there's quite a following in that. So I think you've got to find your way. And, you know, people coach very differently. Children learn very differently. But at the same token, it's building blocks. It's physical building blocks, it's judo building blocks, and it's mental building blocks. You know, like we've been doing quite a lot of fitness within the judo videos of the last 2 weeks, and we'll do that for the next 4. And I'm saying there's nothing worse than stepping on the judo mat and being really unfit.
Yeah, I've been there.
It's exhausting. You think you can do everything you could do before, and then you get the gravel burn in the neck, and you know, and you're breathing out of every possible orifice you have because you're so unfit. And you think, you know, and I think judo fitness is really, really tough, high level fitness. And I know it is, I know scientifically is, because we have to be aerobic and anaerobic. So therefore you are in the top 2% fittest athletes in the world if you're top level. So you can go and run a marathon, but it doesn't mean you can last a judo session. and I think so, making sure those kids are as fit as they physically can be before getting them back on the mat will help, because otherwise that's going to be one of the things that will trip them up before they come back, and that's really key. So, you know, I think you're absolutely right, those building blocks are there, but for different things and for different elements. They all grow and develop at different rates for the kids.
Definitely, fitness is very important now. And I know when we took 6 months off and I came back, then just the instructors, they record a few videos, and my fitness was gone.
Yeah.
It was actually our head instructor. We were doing a video of Tayotashi, and I went to throw him, and he tried everything, sinking his body weight down, and I couldn't throw him. But it ended up in brute force rather than technique, just to get him over.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you know, the minute they can go back to competitions, it'll be really interesting to see. You know, it'll be, you know, because there are kids that do more than one sport normally. You know, boxing tallies in quite nicely with judo. I know a few kids that do boxing as well as judo because it's good for their hand and eye coordination and their fitness. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. You know, wouldn't even like to guess what weight my two are. You know, in terms of the weight categories, we'll have to be putting on a you know, an application form for a competition. No ideas. So I think it'll be a very interesting time, but it'll be a shame if we lose many from it. Yeah, I think before lockdown, we were now the biggest club in Wales. We had, you know, at one point 135 members, which is really, really encouraging, particularly how sport is different to how it was 20, 30 years ago with numbers. And I just hope we don't lose too many of them. I know we've lost a couple already, but I hope we don't lose too many. And like I said, we had good numbers. You know, we were running 3 sessions, and the maximum we could have on each session, I think, was 10. So we were 3 sessions 3 times a week. So, you know, we're looking in the 90s there if everybody was coming. So that is positive, and that is good. So hopefully they will come back, and we will be able to build on it. And even if we are starting, you know, as right back to the basics of gradings and things, you know, I don't think it'll matter what grade you were on, you can't remember any of it. You'll have to start again. So I think that's quite interesting. I mean, personally, I find it quite difficult breaking down the building blocks of the techniques, because it was something I just did naturally for years. So I find being a teacher much easier of maths, because I can see the steps, and I didn't always find maths easy. I just always loved it. So I find I'm a far better maths teacher than I probably am a judo coach, because I can't see the steps along the way. And that's when I mean, I often look in the Coca Kids stuff with Nicola Fairbrother, who was a player at my club. And, you know, she's got a really nice way of breaking the techniques down with her images and the graphics. And for me, I have to look at them, and I have to remember the names, because I don't remember that many of the names either. I did them, you know, and I think that's quite interesting, because Richard at our club, the head coach, Bevan, you know, he is far more clued in with terminologies, the Japanese definitions. He teaches the children all of that, something I was never taught as a child. But you know, it's all different, and it all works. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Excellent. And do you think it's important to learn all the Japanese terminology as well, as an extra to the art?
It wasn't something I grew up with.
Yeah.
You know, in my club, like I said, we were very competitive, and we knew what we needed to know to compete. What I would say I find quite interesting with how Richard describes things to children is it explains what the technique is.
Yeah.
So Ouchi being O being a major, Ko being minor, that sort of stuff. I didn't know any of that before working with Richard. So instantly you can see why one's a major and one's a minor when you know the technique you're talking about. You know, goshi with the hips, and obviously ogoshi. So yeah, I think it helps if that works for you. And I don't think it does the children any harm to learn how to count in Japanese and have that difference of experience. I mean, I think if you breed that Japanese element, they'll want to go to Japan.
Yeah.
To go and see that culture in action. You know, I went, I don't know, 7-8 times as a player. It's nothing like you would ever imagine the first time you go, you know, and I think that is something that is nice to breed that interest, and that, you know, we're always aware of the heritage and, you know, who invented it and where it came from. So yeah, I don't think it's remotely detrimental to learn about it, but I also was a product of a club that didn't learn about it and did okay as a competitor.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you want to embrace the element of judo and the life of judo, then I think you do need to know the terminology and the history of it. And I think that's probably really applicable in the kata as well, from the little bit I know about kata.
Excellent. I always remember back when I was going for my black belt now, there was we were actually tipped off before that all the throws would be called out in Japanese rather than English, and none of us, well, I would have been one of the few that was very into the history of it.
Yeah.
So for the week before, I was actually coaching everybody else on the Japanese and writing out the terms. But I think
whereas I didn't know any of the English definition. I was only ever taught the Japanese word and taught the technique. So, you know, I was never taught that Taitoshi was hand throw body drop. I only know that because Richard Sells, you know, has said that to the kids in all the time I've been coming to the club.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I didn't know I was learning Japanese. Obviously, I was just learning the techniques as I went. So, but no, I think when you look at like the file he gives the children for the gradings, you've got the Japanese and the British definition. Yeah. So they are expected to learn it. So I think it's just a good experience of learning. It's just something new, something else that's going into a child's brain that they can associate with and can help them to learn. And it's a bit different to school, isn't it? You know, at the end of not being taught it, directly being told it, they are doing it. They're doing it and experiencing it.
You mentioned earlier too that some of your students had autism and things such as that. Do you think judo is very good for people with disabilities?
Yes, I do. I really do. I think it's very inclusive. I think I used to fight a girl that was deaf many, you know, when I was under 10, years and years ago, and she was a phenomenal athlete even then, you know, and often with somebody who's got a disability, they've got extra strength, you know, in another area. And I mean, she was phenomenally strong. And it instantly made me aware of deaf people. Having never grown up with, never went to school with anybody that had a hearing problem, to fight one and suddenly be hands-on. I remember one of my friends fighting in a competition of trials, and she fought a girl that was missing the lower part of her arm. And she was doing, you know, she was fighting it, and the girl was giving her a really good run for her money, you know, and she was using that arm as a sort of a lever, you know, to, and, you know, she was not inconvenienced in any way by having, you know, missing the lower part of her arm. But what was quite interesting was my friend was easing off on her a bit. Flexibility. So you don't need to give her an inch. She's not backing down, you know? And that for her, that was quite a challenge, because that girl wanted to be seen on an equal level playing field. She was there to compete. Yeah. And that was, you know, and she wanted to be dealt with in exactly the same way as that player would have dealt with any other player. So I think it's a really, really inclusive sport. I think it's diverse. I think it's all colours and creeds do it across the world, you know, which I think certain sports may have a certain element of type of person that does them. That doesn't happen in judo. You have a huge plethora of different children, adults coming from different life experiences. I think that's really key. I think also one of the things I love about judo is you don't get bullies. Yeah. I think you get that in other sports. I think you get it in school. Even no matter how hard a school tries or teachers try, this still happens, always happens on a playground. Somebody always comes to the surface. Yeah. And years ago, we were in the Olympic Village, and we had to stop the coach to wait for somebody. And the arrogance in this person as they got on, and they were the reserve for the 100-meter relay team. They weren't even to run. And the arrogance was, you'd never see anything like it. Yeah. With the athletics team, and we both said, what? You know, what is that about? And they were like, well, you know, he's up and coming, he's won the junior. I said, just wouldn't happen in judo. Just wouldn't happen. When you go on a training camp or go in a competition, everybody's equal. And the minute somebody tries to be above equal, there's always somebody bigger and better that will get hold of you and ensure you aren't. And I like that in a club environment. I think anybody gets the opportunity to be the fish in a big pond, you know, a big fish in a small pond. Yeah. I think if a club has got a really good culture and everybody is treated equally, irrespective of their ability or results, I think that you just breed a really inclusive, supportive environment, and people want to come back. You know, they want to come back to that environment, and they want to be part of it. They want to be part of a club culture. The friendships you make, the sort of social element of it is really important and helpful. The club sits together at competitions, or when they go out on, you know, we planted some trees on World Judo Day, you know, like we did it as a club, and I think it's a fabulously inclusive sport. I think, you know, and I've always seen that, you know, when we were at major competitions, if people would, you know, obviously you do get, at one point we had refugees coming across to other countries and not even having a kit. People would be giving them kits. People would be ensuring they could compete. So I think, and I do think it's really, really good for ALM children. We've had quite a few come through already at Irvine, and we've still got more. And I think it's a strength of the club. I think it's a real strength to see them develop and grow. I also think children are then exposed to different people in life. You can't keep them sheltered and keep them in one way of thinking. They need to see the diversity within the world and experience it and be part of handling it. And, you know, like my daughter was, you know, she was fighting a lot of the girls. I put her with one of the lads. Now he's really physically strong, you know, and he's a nice kid, but he's really physically strong.
Yeah.
Got, you know, she got her ego knocked. She got a little bit teary, and like, and that was, I deliberately put her in that environment because she was becoming top of her area, you know, and she did to have that experience. And actually that's the tell of somebody if they're going to make it, not just in sport but in life, isn't it? If you can getting your head up and coming back even when it's all going wrong, and not having a tantrum or a hissy fit or throwing anything out your pram, then that makes a really good individual and a really good member of society. And that's what we want to be producing. And I think judo really enables that, as long as everybody that's coaching and part of that club treats everybody equally. Because kids know if you don't.
Yeah.
I see it in ed teaching and I see it in sport. If there's any favourites or anybody's been allowed to get away with anything, they a mile off, and it really rubs them up the wrong way. You know, they really don't like it, children. I don't mind getting told off, as long as everybody gets told off that's doing it, you know. They don't like unfair treatment, and I think you've got to be so mindful of that as a coach, haven't you? Because you always have kids that are doing slightly better, or you can see real potential in them, and I think you've got to constantly have that in the back of your mind, that you can't treat any of them differently, because it will be picked up on. I find it really hard. I think I'm probably extra harsh on my own too, because I don't want people to think I favour them as their mother.
Yeah.
So mine get probably a worse deal, because I don't want to appear like I'm favouring them as members of the club. So I think they get probably a bit of a tougher deal. I could wait, really.
That's the same as myself. Now my oldest daughter should be 16 now this month, but she's always trained really hard. She probably would be one of the best we have.
Yeah.
But I refuse to grade her. It's always, I put her in one of the other instructors' clubs. The other instructors grade. I try to separate myself as much as possible from it. Now I do teach her at home.
Yeah.
But in the clubs, I separate myself, because I noticed myself as she was about 13, 14, she's starting to say people are thinking I'm getting ahead because Dad's a sensei. And so I've always tried to keep myself separate from that. So it's clear that she's not getting special treatment, but
it is hard though. And I think it's also hard if you've had a career in it yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's like siblings. People always want to compare siblings, you know. And I think one of the biggest bonuses is that I have a different name. You know, my competition name was my pre-married name.
Yeah.
So, you know, they aren't singletons. So I think that's a really nice element, that they are finding their own identity, has an expectation of them. You know, as a club, some parents aren't even aware of the level I was. You know, it's big, except I have a name on the back of my kit, and I've got Union Jacks on my kicks with Union Jack on. That's the only reason they would know I was at a level I was. So sometimes it's quite difficult when you're in the shadow of someone or the shoes of someone else. But also, I think you've got to be really mindful that like you say, that it's them wanting to do it. You know, and there was children when I was younger whose parents had bought mats and were doing loads of stuff at home with them, and the kids just end up walking away. They absolutely hated it. And I mean, and those are kind of the conversations we've had in lockdown. I'm not going to drag you kicking and screaming, as though I want them to do it. I think they physically needed to do it. They're both far unfitter now than they were a year ago because of COVID. And I think it's really important, and it's great to keep those skills on board, as well as the muscle memory. I always go on about muscle memory, but you know, it's really important if you're doing those techniques that it goes into that muscle memory. Yeah. But so I'm not going to force them to do it if they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Work is a different ball game. We didn't have any issues with lockdown, but if there was, we would have dealt with that. But yeah, like you say, and it's a fine line, and you know, just making sure that they find their own identity as a player. They'll have traits of you, like both mine are left-handed at judo at the moment. They may not stay it, but they're not left-handed in life, you know. So I don't know. But I just think it's an absolutely fabulous sport for developing you as a person, developing you as a whole-rounded, confident person that wants to live life, and and will take anything on the chin. Anything that comes your way, you're ready to deal with it because you've been in an environment where you've had to deal with something, and and the consequences are quite painful if you don't. So I think that's a really, and I'm always amazed by the children I think that won't last, that do.
Yeah.
The ones that you think, oh, he's a toughie, he's going to be here a while, or she knows what she wants, and then they don't last. I am always truly amazed as to the ones you think will make it and the ones that actually truly end up making it. And by making it, I mean just developing in it and getting to the level they wanted to get to.
Yeah, I know we had one student now, and she's actually the same age as my daughter, and anytime we had tournaments that she won everything. No one in our clubs could beat her. And it came to a point my daughter was starting to lose interest a bit, so I set it up so the two of them would have a wee sparring match one night, and she beat my daughter, but that gave my girl then the kind of competitiveness that she was just, her next aim was just to get to that point. And but I know now the other girls actually left the sport altogether, so it's a shame, but
it is. But I always say to a lot of people I support and work with in both my job and friends, you're in for the war, not the battle. So if you're going the whole hog, you've got a way to win on the way. And often the people that make it are the people that were really good when they were children, because they don't know what it's like to lose. They can't handle losing, that it's not something they've ever done. And because they were really successful as a younger person, they've got to overcome that challenge. They've got to deal with that challenge. They've got to maintain that resilience in it. And I think, your daughter took a situation there and it built her determination and resilience. Whereas in education, we talk about resilience and mindset. And in some schools, there'll be display boards and keywords. That's not what builds resilience. Resilience is enduring it. So going on head on, losing and going back again, whatever that losing looks like, whether it's in schooling, in sport, in interest, hobby, it doesn't matter what it is. You build resilience by falling down and getting back up again and going back at it. And I think that's often the tipping point. That's often the tipping and the balance. And and I have that conversation with children as a teacher. My dream was to be an Olympic champion. I'm not. But it doesn't take away anything that I did. And like the one player in particular, German player, Imbriani, Raffaella, I can still remember her to this day. She used to give me a kicking every single time I fought her. And she threw me the highest I'd ever been thrown in a European final. But, we got on fabulously. We'd go out for dinner of an evening. There was a real professional respect there, even though she literally battered me all of my adult career. But there was twice and those are the two times that I remember. And they're one of my proud successes, even though they weren't major taught medals, but that was one of my major successes because I'd overcome that constant and not going on to that thinking I'm going to lose again. I think that's the difference. That's how you build resilience in your children and your adults. And judo does do that. There's small victories, but they're there every week. Every week there's something you can overcome that helps to build that within your personality. And often the children that walk away aren't the ones who've got that resilience for life that they need. Life's not easy. And what's going to get thrown at you, and you have to have that within your personality to deal with it. And everybody manifests it differently, but you have to have it within your soul to handle whatever comes your way. Otherwise it's going to be a really tough time.
Definitely. No. I remember one of my first experiences from martial arts and was kickboxing and sparring match, and the guy roundhouse kicked me to the side of the head, knocked me out, and I was only about maybe 12, and that just set me up. I was determined that no one was ever going to get that strike on me again.
Yeah, exactly.
And I went on and started to instruct and all that, and it was about 2-3 years ago, the guy that actually done it actually walked into one of my clubs to join the club and hadn't trained in about 15 years.
Yeah.
And was very tempted to spar him but but I didn't. But I just thought it was just a sort of moral victory that he couldn't do it anymore. But
yeah, exactly. And a different outcome would have been that was you done.
yeah,
You know, you'd have walked away from that and you were finished. That wasn't going to be the sport for you anymore. But it's led to you having a career in it and enjoying it. I mean, I remember vividly after coming back from the games, seeing somebody in Bracknell, where I grew up with my mum, and having to see her in Bracknell Market, and telling me that they could have gone to the Olympics because they used to beat me. I was a bit like, oh, okay. And you can imagine my mum, you know, like so proud of her daughter, you know, hackles up, really raging. And I said, yeah, but it's not just about who gets beaten, is it? It's about the whole journey I went through to get there.
yeah.
You know, beating me when I was a kid doesn't mean you can make it to an Olympic Games. It's nowhere near that simple. And she was a bit like, oh, okay. I thought, who would dream of saying that to somebody? Unless it's somebody that actually massively regrets walking away from the sport.
Yeah.
Because they were gifted. They were better than me as a kid. But they didn't have what it took to get to the end game, to win the war, you know. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, the whole sort of I could have, and you think, yeah, but let's come to reality. Let's come to this point in time, you know, and they might well have achieved lots of other things in other ways. It's not about, you know, but I find I wouldn't dream of going to anybody that I used to play or, you know, hang out, you know, I had kids in my maths class that would be phenomenally good. I wouldn't dream of going to them and go, do your job because I could nearly be as good at you at maths. You know, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's really an insight into a person's perception of the world and how life works. But you know, the key is no excuses, isn't it? And I think again, it's another excellent element around judo that enables children to really succeed, whether it is to just feel a sense of achievement or gain a belt or get a medal. You know, over the years saw lots of parents that would make excuses for their children losing, blame the referee, you know, all of these sorts of things. And actually then it turns out those children haven't succeeded as well in life as they should have with the start point they had. Yeah. You know, and it doesn't help anybody. You know, we've got, husband and I've got friends, children who were spoiled, absolute rotten. They've not, you know, one of them is, you know, really struggling and they haven't amounted to what they should have in terms of the opportunities and where they were starting. So, you know, it levels everybody, you know, no matter how money you got, no matter, you know, what car you drive, doesn't matter, you know, you can put someone in a kit, they'll hold their own. And that's, you know, I said my two the other day about the first time I ever fought a Russian. And like, they didn't seem to have gradings. So they just would give them the belt that was ever in the bag. And literally, like, she was like an orange belt or something. And it was like an international tournament. And my coach, and I'd just seen like another boy get battered by a Russian yellow belt. Yeah. And like Don said to me, do not be mistaken that orange belt means anything. She's going to come at you and you're going to know exactly the standard she is very quickly. So don't give any thought to the belt she's wearing. Sure enough, she was world class, you know? Yeah. But again, you know, it just sort of, it doesn't matter, does it? Because actually that environment equals everybody. You're either up to the or not, you know, and no amount of money, no amount of favoritism, no amount of, you know, will get you any further down that line than actual hard work and skill. That's it, you know. And I do love that about judo. Even with the challenges of drugs in judo, in sport, and they're not massively in judo. They haven't been in all the years I was in it. But if you haven't got the ability and the skill, no matter what, there's no drug that makes you better at judo. That's skill. So actually, it's a pure sport for me in that way. Yeah, you could train harder on drugs, and I'm, you know, all of the things people talk about. But ultimately, if you haven't got the skill and the mindset, you know, you're not going anywhere. That's it. You're sort of you're gonna reach a level at your plateau at. And I do love that, and I do love that it equals the playing field for all.
Excellent. And what is your view on belts now? Because I know a lot of people don't agree with belt systems and things like that, but
for me, as a kid, as a player, we had really, you know, it wasn't that you had to be graded every 6 months like it is now. We were low graded, and that was purely because Dom believed you needed enough results and experience to earn the next above. You know, he was very adamant. You know, in fact, he had a rule that you couldn't, because we had so many children in the club, you were ranked within your weight category in the club.
Yeah.
So like when we would go to a club, they'd have to be putting us in different pools. I mean, one boys' way, I remember having 1 to 8 in it. And the boy's name that was number 8 was called number 8. That was his nickname, because he was number 8 on the 8 kids under 34s, whatever it was. So from my perspective, I felt every belt I got, I really earned, because I had to. But that said, I then rocketed from an orange to a black, because I was like a yellow belt at 12 and a black belt at 15. So I suddenly rapidly went through those belts but his belief was that I was kept at that level to get that competition experience. And if I wanted to be number 1, for example, in a weight category, I had to beat the number 1 5 times in a row before I could take their title of being number 1. Yeah. Expectation was really, really high, and that's what I grew up in. I think the thing is, they're not comparable across the world. So like I'd go to Holland and Belgium as a kid and fight, and there'd be like all different belts that didn't mirror what our belt system was in the UK. But from a coaching perspective now, I feel they're a fabulous incentive. Yeah. And my only worry is that once you tip the balance, like in Wales in particular, once you go onto a yellow or higher, there's no more of the red belt competitions, which is where you need to get that experience. And that you can't buy experience, you know, and actually you can be graded out of it pretty quickly if you're a kid that comes every week and, you know, and you're there, you know. So I think that's quite difficult, because I know of children that have had to move up because they've had to be graded in the time scale, but they probably needed a bit longer at that level to continue to get, because the jump then between a mini mon and an open is quite tough, you know. And my son, he's 10, and before lockdown he was under 37s, so most of the kids fighting were at least 11 on the cusp of 12 and much higher grades. Now don't get me wrong, that's the way that judo works. He was that way, that's fine, it did him no harm, but that's quite a significant amount of difference in age. So by staying in a red belt, he sort of stayed with his own age, stayed with his own weight, but then literally he still fought these opens and they still put him in them, but they were orange and green, 2 years older, and much more physically stronger than him. Yeah. I think it's fine line, but I do like the system, because I think it's really important that children feel a sense of achievement and they get that success. So, you know, you might have a child that doesn't want to do competitions. That's absolutely great. Get them to work through the belts and get that achievement in that way. And I feel judo isn't just a way of making money then, you know, it is, you know, my daughter used to horse ride at a different place up here, and she was going for years. She just didn't seem to be doing anything different. She didn't, as a parent that knows nothing about horse riding, I couldn't tell whether she was getting any better. I couldn't tell what she was trying to get to, you know. And my husband then took her and said, she's not doing anything different, George. You know, Callie's doing exactly what she was doing 2 years ago now. And they were quite happy to keep taking that money. Yeah. So they said they wanted feedback from parents. I said, well, why don't you have like a merit system, an award system, a reward system, something so the children can sense the achievement as they go? Yeah. They're like, well, we don't need to. We got a waiting list. So they don't have to generate interest in their sport. Yeah. To do it enough, they got a waiting list. Whereas I don't think judo probably has that luxury. I don't think other sports have that luxury of got people on a waiting list. So I think it's a really nice incentive, and particularly when I'm talking about a boy in particular, that autistic boy, his face every time he gets a belt or gets them on, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
He is buzzing. He is grinning from ear to ear, and I've got like pictures pop up on Facebook of my two, you know, as they when they got their belts or their mons, and it's dragon stripes in Wales when they're under 8. They're beaming from ear to ear. What an achievement to feel at such a young age that you don't get anywhere else. So I think it's a nice balance of achievement and not always succeeding and getting up again.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for it, really.
Yeah, I love the sense of achievement they get now, and I always joke with my wife, because when we do grades, a lot of the kids will come up at the end and say, "Can I get a photograph?" And they get a photograph for me and the new belt, and I keep saying to her, "I'm in fireplaces all around Ireland, and there in the middle of the fire."
Yeah, it's a really big deal, and you've been on that journey with them. You know, like you have taken them through that journey. They have succeeded along the way with you as their coach. That's lovely. That's really, really nice. And that's one of the bits I've really missed. Is seeing those children grow every week. And that's probably the teacher in me and the love of judo in me. But I love to see them getting better and better as you know, growing in confidence. That proudness of them, you know, and Richard's always really quick. They have to then have their own photo taken, and it's a real big deal. And I'd love to see them having it as a big deal, because gradings weren't a big deal for me as a kid. You know, they weren't. And another thing we do, which is really nice, is for any children that have been and competed at a competition, they bring their medal to the next session. Yeah. And then they get represented with it in front of the other children. Again, not something we ever did at my club, but it's lovely because the younger kids get to see the older kids being congratulated. Because, you know, neither Richard, Phil, or myself are gushy coaches, you know, like overly positive with them all the time. But actually, we do acknowledge when they're doing well, and it's really nice to have them represented with their medals. And I certainly remember Ellis particularly looking at those other kids getting those medals, being desperate to fight a competition so he could get him. And again, you get the medals for attendance now that didn't exist when I was a kid, and I'm a bit out on that as a jury. Mum, I'm glad I'm not taking them home without anything. As a player, I would be, you just didn't get one. That's it. You went to a competition, you didn't get one, you just had to deal with it. So I think society's changed a little bit there, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But as long as you haven't then got somebody going really pushing the bronze they got for losing all their fights, you've got to be really mindful, haven't you, as to, because it does take a lot of courage to even get on that, quite frankly. Particularly at the age of 8, you're on there on your own with somebody that's trying to fight you. There's no other sport except a martial art or maybe boxing that puts you in that physical environment in such an intense situation. And I mean, I'm certainly I'm getting better, but I'm certainly very nervous on the mat side when my own children are fighting, but I'm also nervous when the other children are fighting. I'm trying to coach them. My husband certainly has got better over time, but it was a very anxious experience for both of us, putting them out there, you know, on the mat. Even though I've done it, it's still, you know, and my mum just went, well, you wait till they get to the top level, then you've got no chance. You're just in bits all the time coming up to the event. Because as a player, I never even thought about anybody else's feelings around me fighting. I didn't ever think about the anxiety it was causing my mum or sister, and because you don't, otherwise you wouldn't be at that level, would you? If you were worrying about everybody else, you wouldn't be at that level. So that's an interesting side as a parent and a coach. That's something I would have never known about as a player. Yeah,
definitely. And finally, Georgina, what advice would you give young ladies starting out in martial arts and sort of starting their journey in judo?
I would say it's so good for your soul. And I know that sounds really, really odd, but actually that opportunity to be physical, to release that aggression. Aggression's often associated with boys, you know, it's good for them to have a, you know, we still see year 8s having a rough and tumble in secondary schools, but actually girls need to release that aggression. that energy in a really controlled environment. I think that physicality is really important. I think more and more now women are more active, more sporty, it's more acceptable. We're not, you know, once we leave school, we go and don't ever do sport again. I think far more mums particularly are far more active. So I would say embrace every minute of it. It's not always going to be easy, but what defines you is how you get up when it isn't easy. And that's how you handle what comes next in life. So everything about it, you learn from it and it builds you. And it just makes you a strong, confident woman that can take on the world. Excellent. And whatever the world is. That's what comes from it if you've done a sport like that at that age.
Yeah, excellent. And thank you very much for coming back on, Georgina. It was a pleasure speaking with you again.
No, that's okay. Thank you.